Hello viewers, welcome to another episode of Low Fidelity Commander. My name is Little Beep, and today I want to show off some matches with Prossh, Skyraider of Kher, or however you're supposed to say that. A warning before I begin, as with Magan of Clan Neltoth, I think that this deck is probably not quite suitable for Tier 1. I think you could probably, in a competitive Commander League, win most of your matches with it once you get a little bit of practice, but I personally would not take it into a Commander challenge if I were looking to top 8. However, the deck is a lot of fun. It attacks from some unexpected angles and wins with some unique cards, and as you'll even see in a couple of these matches, people really aren't sure how to play against the deck. So just a quick overview of how everything works. This is Prossh. Prossh is a big dragon. His main important characteristic here is that he makes a lot of O1s when you cast him. And importantly, that's a cast trigger. So even if Prossh gets countered, you're still going to end up with 6 O1 creatures the first time, 8 0-1s the second time, 10 the third time, and so on. So you basically have this green, red, black ramp deck that is capable of putting out lots of tiny creatures with extreme regularity. Basically every game you'll be able to do this. And so what do you do with all these little creatures? Well, you can use them first as sacrifice fodder. So we have cards like Diabolic Intent, which is just Demonic Tutor, but you have to sacrifice a creature. So this is an incredible card for this deck. You're just about always going to have a kobold lying around from Prossh. If not, you can also sacrifice an elf if you need to go grab a sweeper or something else in the early game before Prossh has come out. You get Phyrexian Tower, a just 2-mana land that even produces colored mana, and all you have to do is sack creatures. So this is a great way for, if you cast Prossh, for example, you have 6 mana, your opponent kills it immediately, leaving you with a bunch of O1s, you can just lay this down and cast Prossh again the next turn. It just is an incredible ramp spell for the deck. And in terms of actually winning the game, we are running Beastmaster Ascension. Once we have attacked with 7 creatures over the course of having this in play, all our creatures get +5/+5, so it wins the game immediately after you've cast a Prossh if your opponent hasn't killed anything, and otherwise wins in 2 turns. We get Pattern of Rebirth, and Prossh has another ability, which is that Prossh can sacrifice the kobolds at any point, which means that if we throw Pattern of Rebirth onto a kobold and we sacrifice it, we get to get any creature out of our deck. Usually that's just going to be Craterhoof Behemoth if we already have a lot of tokens for the instant win. And sometimes if you have had a bunch of your tokens killed, or for whatever other reason Craterhoof Behemoth isn't going to work on the board, you can get Primeval Titan. Primeval Titan can get you enough mana to cast Prossh again, and from there winning usually is pretty easy as well. Otherwise, we have a bunch of ramp. You want to get Prossh out on turn 3 or turn 4. I recently added Dark Ritual to the deck as a way to get turn 3 Prossh more often, just to keep up with the speed of decks like Markov and some of the blue combo decks out there. And so far I've liked it. Haven't cast it much, but I've liked it. You have Goblin Bombardment. You can just clear an entire board of vampire tokens or an entire Tymna board after casting a Prossh with this and just grind out a control win that way. You've got Fecundity, which whenever a creature dies, that's yours or your opponent's, that creature's controller may draw a card. Thankfully, in this deck, Fecundity is not very symmetrical. You can just go ahead and draw 6 cards after casting a Prossh, and from there, again, you're usually going to find enough tools to win with. We have Garruk Wildspeaker, which doubles as a ramp spell and an overrun, so you can cast him on turn 3, ramp into a Prossh with him on turn 4, and then overrun on turn 5, which is often just going to be lethal damage, again, if your opponent isn't disrupting you. You've got Xenagos, who in this deck is actually using his +1 ability, so adds a red or green mana for every creature you control, so after you cast Prossh, if they kill Prossh, you can just play Xenagos and immediately cast Prossh again with the +1. Or you can use the +1 to cast a Craterhoof Behemoth, or a Green Sun Zenith for Craterhoof Behemoth. You've also got Hit Run. This is one of your other win conditions once you have all the tokens down. It, in the early game, can kill a creature, although it's not very reliable, it's just a sacrifice effect. But in the late game, it gives everything +6/+0 or something like that. And we do run Hit Run over Overrun just because, A, it's more damage if you're attacking with 5 kobolds. They all get +4 power, for example, as opposed to +3 power, and it just scales up from there. And once in a while you will find yourself using the removal spell in the early game. It's miserable against something like vampires, but against a Jace Vryn's Prodigy or an Azusa, it can occasionally have some utility. And that's pretty much the deck. We've also got the Spicy Rakdos' return over here. This is another recent addition, and I haven't had a chance to try it yet. It might just be horrible. But otherwise, most of the cards in the deck are just good value cards. Chandra, Toxic Deluge, Dismember, Abrade, Lightning Bolt, Thoughtseize, etc. you want to be doing a little bit of stuff to keep up with your opponents as you're building out your combo. But with no further ado, let's get into the games. So again, I don't think this deck is really tier 1, but my win rate with it in the competitive league is somewhere around 60%, and I'm just coming off a 4-1 that had some pretty good games in it, so I wanted to show those off here. So we're going to start out with the first match of the league against Livets. So Livets is running Sidisi, a deck that has fallen slightly out of favor, but which is still quite powerful, can still win on turn 3 or 4 with some regularity. So our opening hand, we started out with a 2-lander plus a Sakura Trivelder and some 4-drops, Xenagos and Wanvili Acid Moss, but we also had Painful Truths. So even though we needed to hit a land with this hand, worst case scenario, we cast Sakura Trivelder on turn 2 and Painful Truths on turn 3, and then we can at least hit our 4-drop on time, which isn't great, but we have some explosive potential, and now we, as you can see, we immediately draw a land, which means we're going to get a turn 3 Wanvili Acid Moss, killing our opponent's land, getting a land of our own, and then casting Prossh when they have 2 mana in play. So things are looking good on that front. So we're just going to go ahead and cast Sakura Trivelder. Opponent's going to start with a Jet Medallion, very powerful spell for them, reduces everything they have by 1 mana, so is often going to give them 2 or 3 mana in a single turn, but thankfully we can at least reduce their mana a little bit, so we sack Sakura Trivelder. This turn we're just going to Wanvili Acid Moss, and we even drew another land, which means we're definitely going to get Prossh out on time. So our opponent goes ahead, casts a Liliana the Veil, pluses it. We just discard Xenagos because we're just going to play Prossh this turn, and as far as having explosive potential, I'd much rather have Fecundity in hand than the Prossh. It's possible that I could have discarded Painful Truths that turn, just to have Fecundity and Xenagos in play at the same time is very powerful, but I'm also trying to hedge a little bit around my opponent having a Wrath or something like that, and in case I play Prossh and they Wrath, I would much rather have Painful Truths to recover with than have a random Xenagos that isn't generating very much mana yet. Again, could have been the wrong play. It's not as though there are super well-established play patterns, but yes, no one else is really running it right now. Anyway, so we just go ahead and cast Prossh here. Opponent's going to untap, and they did miss a land drop last turn. That Wanvili Acid Moss really got them, so they just go ahead and reanimate our Sakura Trivelder to go get another Swamp. Fair enough, good creative play. We just discard this Night's Whisper, which is much worse than Fecundity or Painful Truths, and now, because we're a combo deck playing against another combo deck, this is the turn you get to see what we can do. So we slam Fecundity, and at this point we don't have any way to overrun our opponent. We don't have a hit run, we don't have a Beastmaster Ascension, nothing like that, so we're just going to go ahead and draw as many cards as possible. Right now we're just looking for disruption. Our basic goal here is just draw so many cards that our opponent can't get out from under us killing their stuff, discarding their cards, etc. And then we can just kind of win with the 5/5 Dragon at our leisure, because if they ever kill it, we can just recast it. But we do have to watch out, because they did discard a Necrotic Ooze at some point, which of course is a reminder that if they ever have a Buried Alive and a Reanimation spell in the same turn, which with Jet Medallion, casting both of those might not be too difficult, they can just kill us out of nowhere and there's not much we can do about it. So we want to be pretty careful here. So we're going to look around, see what we draw. So again, drawing 6 cards means we're probably going to find something. We go ahead and attack Liliana before we draw the rest of these cards, though. It possibly would have been good to attack Liliana first. We're just trying to make sure here that they're not going to kill our Prossh. Before we get rid of Liliana, we might play differently depending on whether they save their Liliana or not. So we go ahead and draw some more cards. We find our land drop, great. And we find some mana. Right now we are looking for something disruptive, and there we go. So with 1 Kobold to go, we find Fire Covenant, and this is exactly what we want here, because the way Sidisi works, if they cast it, its ability to tutor is going to go on the stack. They need to sacrifice a creature to use that ability, so if we use Fire Covenant and kill Sidisi in response, the ability is not going to work anymore. So we basically have a card that can now shut off one of their tutors for next turn. So even though I could develop my mana pretty well, we really want to leave up Fire Covenant just in case. We'd really rather not let them tutor, if at all possible. So we're just going to cast an Arbor Elf, play a land, develop the mana a little bit more, and pass the turn. So on their turn, they go ahead and just fire off a Diabolic Tutor, which we can't do anything about, so it's a little disappointing. We didn't make the most efficient use of our mana, but whatever. We had no way of knowing they weren't just going to draw a land and play Sidisi. And again, we can still counter Sidisi if we have to, although it's very likely they just cast Diabolic Tutor to get Buried Alive. So at this point, we are looking for cards that can either take stuff out of their hand or kill the Jet Medallion to slow them down. Or possibly something like an Ashnod's Altar, a card that would let us sacrifice Prossh and then replay Prossh and set up for a combo kill in the next turn. But let's see what comes. We do have a lot of card drop potential in our hand, and we just rip a Thoughtseize, so easy enough. Again, we have Thoughtseize, we have Rakdos' return would be fantastic here, we have him to Turok, so a lot of different disruptive elements, plus a few different ways we can take out a Jet Medallion. So we're just going to Thoughtseize here, see what they have. They have a Skull Clamp for some reason, as well as an extra Planar Lens and an Exhume, but we of course just take Buried Alive. Against Sidisi, if you can get Buried Alive out of their hand and they don't have a Yawgmoth's Will, they have a really hard time setting up the win just because they need to reanimate to kill you. They really don't have much in the way of win conditions, especially when they're as strained on mana as this Sidisi deck is. And for the rest of our turn, we just deploy a lot of stuff, start beating down. So Painful Truths draws us a Wood Elves, and at this point it looks like we're probably going to try and just win with a Garruk Overrun here. So we play Garruk. We could have made a Beast here, but again I'm just playing to Overrun, and we have enough creatures we can play. This is going to be fine. So again, we're holding up Fire Covenant just in case they draw land and use Sidisi to tutor for something, I don't know. Again, we have to live through about 2 more turns, and we're going to win the game easily with the amount of stuff we have going on. So, okay, so this turn they are going to go for, okay, extra Planar Lens instead of Sidisi. That's interesting. They may suspect that we have removal. I'm not really sure what's going on with that play, but they've successfully ramped from having 5 mana with the Jet Medallion to 6 mana, so they might be trying for like a Sidisi Exhume combo thing, who knows. Okay, so we draw a couple more creatures. Just continue to play Mana Dorks. And yeah, Overrunning next turn looks like it's going to be pretty easy. Now we could have played Dryad Arbor at some point just to give us a little bit of redundancy with the Overrun, but if they do have a way to kill something, they're going to kill Prossh. And in that case, the Overrun math doesn't really matter much either way. I don't think this is doing anything to our clock, although it's possible I was being a bit lazy here because I felt pretty confident. Uncertain. Anyway, we leave Fire Covenant up again, just in case, knock him to 19. And here, I could have played a Dryad Arbor that turn, because as you can see, we have 5 mana left up with the Hedron Archive, and because Hedron produces 2 colorless mana, even if we hadn't played a land, we would still have red-black colorless for the Fire Covenant, so not the smoothest to play, but whatever. So they do go for Sidisi here, and we finally get to Fire Covenant it. And they do go ahead and Exhume the Sidisi, but at this point we have the kill with Overrun, so we go ahead and untap. And off of our Sylvan Library that we got to play last turn, we even draw an Eternal Witness, so just in case something weird is going on, we are going to go ahead and Eternal Witness back our Thoughtseize to make sure they can't interfere with this Overrun kill. Again, I don't think there's anything they could have, but just in case. And they've seen enough at that point, and they concede. Okay, so again, we got a turn 4 Prossh off after killing one of their lands in the early game, and then had just enough disruption to make sure they weren't going to do anything dangerous as we comboed off. Okay. Second match of the league was against Magan, an extremely skilled player, might be the trophy leader, not sure, running Tymna and Crown, very, tier 1 commander list. And they're even on the play, so this is going to be difficult. So we kept a hand. We had to mulligan our first hand and then kept 2 lands, a Sylvan Library, a Kadama's Reach, a Painful Truth. So we're going to be maybe a little tied up on mana. It would be really good if we had an elf and could just get ahead on mana really quickly, because against Crown and Tymna, you really just want to play a Prossh as soon as possible. You're not going to be able to keep up with their value plays, probably even with a Sylvan Library in play. Again, because they can pressure your life total too with Crown. And so really what we want to do is ideally get a lot of mana going, but because we have a Sylvan, we're going to Sylvan. So we go ahead and play out a land. They play out a Baleful Strix, which means that probably Tymna's going to come down and start drawing cards. Nothing we can really do about that. All we can do is Sylvan Library and hope at this point that we can draw, say, a Toxic Deluge or Fire Covenant or a Kolaghan's Command, something that'll let us 2-for-1 them, the Commander and the Baleful Strix. So 3 options for cards to draw, and hey, we just hit a Toxic Deluge. Nice. And so that makes this turn pretty easy. We do hit some lands with it. We go ahead and pay all the life because we really want to make sure to hit a land drop every turn. That's very important. So they take their turn. They Thoughtseize our Garruk Wild Speaker, which, okay, not sure I agree with that plan, but I can't see their hand, so it's a perfectly reasonable choice. They play a Dak Faden, which is going to give them lots of card selection, which unfortunately is going to eventually spell our doom, but we're going to play out a tough game first. So we get 2 lands and an Abrade here. In the end, we're going to throw away the Abrade. The card that's going to kill us now, if something does kill us, is Crown. And Abrade does not kill Crown, and as far as I can tell, this looks like the control list of Tymna Crown. It doesn't run a lot of creatures, so I don't think this Abrade is going to have much other use. And this turn, we are just going to go ahead and play out a Kodama's Reach, just try and advance our mana as much as possible, keep hitting land drops. And if we had had something like a Nature's Lore or a Wall of Roots or any other kind of early play this game that they hadn't been able to disrupt, we'd have had a Prossh for sure next turn. I mean, it still looks like we're going to have a Prossh next turn, but unfortunately they managed to DAC. And they're just going to Vindicate a land after duressing our hit runs. They've taken away a potential win condition for us, so tokens aren't necessarily just going to get the job done by themselves. And they've killed one of our lands, which means we have to wait another turn to get Prossh down. Kind of disappointing. So these Sylvan Library turns are always difficult. We get another land. It's a Westvale Abbey, which is powerful, and maybe we should have kept it, but again, we're going down to 12 if we keep one card. If we keep Westvale Abbey, we're going to 8, which means that, say, Crown plus Lightning Bolt would just kill us. And we have to be pretty careful here. And there's always the risk that our Westvale Abbey somehow gets stopped if they can kill a token or two, or if they have a Swords to Plowshares, and then the game's pretty much over, because we're going to need these tokens to win with most of our other win conditions. Again, it's possible we should have kept the Westvale Abbey. Not sure. We do keep a Nature's Lore, though. Nature's Lore is great. It means we get to advance our mana, and also have mana up to play Beast Within on their Crown if they play that next turn, and play around something like a Force Spike. Or if they get a little greedy and try to leave up a counter for Prossh, we can just Beast Within their land. So we have some options this turn. They're going to DAC. They just go for Snapcaster Mage into Vindicate. They're just going to keep taking out lands, which, not sure about that plan. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense. They don't know that we're going to keep hitting land drops, and maybe they just want to kill our first Prossh and keep us from playing a second one. So they're attacking our mana base. And at this point, we're just going to go ahead and Beast Within Dack Fayden. We could have Beast Within a land, but Dack Fayden is going to let them keep playing lands if they want to, and another thing that they can do, for example, is this point they could just use the Dack Fayden ultimate, which is -6, and then if they Lightning Bolt Prossh, they just get to take it, or Fire Ice or anything else like that, and it's just not worth having that risk be open. Beast Within is great in this deck, by the way, because the Beast just gets chump blocked very easily, even if we're at a low life total like this. So in this case, we finally get to play Prossh. We throw back 2 cards. At this point, we know we're going to play Prossh this turn. We do not have a lot of life to play around with, and so we are just going to be looking for removal for Crown, or cards that let us combo off and kill our opponent, like Pattern of Rebirth. That's pretty much what we want to find with Sylvan Library, and we want to spend our life total on keeping cards like that. So here we play Prossh, and sadly, all that Dack Fayden usage has kind of helped them sculpt their hand a bit, and they're able to Murderous Cut, take out take out Prossh, which means they now get to play Crown. And we are taking 4 here, so again, the Snapcaster and the Beast, not really huge threats, but these kobolds aren't going to last forever. So, and this turn we do not get to play Prossh, so we're just going to Eternal Witness for some removal. We can't really get back Toxic Deluge, because then they could just play a 7th land and kill us if we spend 4 life on that. So we're just going to make sure we keep hitting land drops. Now fetching there might be a little risky, but again, it helps to reshuffle our deck so we can see more stuff off the Sylvan. If we just let the game run on for a while, they are eventually going to draw a Lightning Bolt or something like that and be able to damage us enough to take us out, maybe a Fiery Confluence or something like that. So we're playing to win. We're not playing to not lose. We're playing to win. So, but with the Sylvan Library, I'm never sure if I'm playing perfectly. So here we go ahead and Beast Within on our opponent's upkeep. And oh no, are we about to bug out here? It looks like Magic Online thinks we mistapped, and oh dear, things are breaking down in the replay zone, but the game was pretty short from here. Essentially, we used Beast Within to kill Crown. They thankfully didn't have a counter, but they did go ahead and we played out another turn. Basically, we played Prossh again, but they were able to kill Prossh again. And then they recast Crown and had a Pyroclasm, so all of our chump blockers suddenly didn't matter, and they, with the 2 Beast tokens, were able to kill us easily. But yeah, the game bugs out from here, so close one. Had we gone on the play here, we might have had enough tempo just to beat them. They would have had trouble maybe getting in the Dack Fayden on the curve while still playing Tymna and things like that, but you go second half the time, that's how it goes, and in this case we just didn't quite have enough to get through Crown. The Tymna Thrasios matchup is considerably better here just because they don't have any giant flyers, and it's really hard for them to get through the walls of kobolds, as you'll see a little bit later on. Anyway, so our next game is going to be Movin X, another very skilled player, this time piloting Tymna Thrasios. One of the attractions of Prossh is it's reasonable against Markov decks. It is reasonable against the big mana combo decks that are not blue, so decks without counters like Azusa and Sidisi do pretty well. but it's very good against Tymna Thrasios and Brea, kind of the mid-rangey control decks that are looking to kill you with creatures. You have enough mana to go toe-to-toe with them and just cast your commander over and over again, and it's generally very hard for them to punch through what you're doing before you can get a combo going. So those matchups are pretty favorable. But again, we're on the draw here, so nothing is ever guaranteed. And we have a hand that is very quick. No ramp right now besides the Dark Ritual, but the Dark Ritual might still let us get down a surprise turn 4 Prossh if we have to. And a Sylvan Library again. Sylvan Library, good card. One goes ahead and just has a Thrasios, a pretty medium start. We just fire off Sylvan Library. Our opponent throws down Tymna, and they're going to start drawing cards here. And again, we're going to be faced with a lot of different decisions here with the Sylvan Library. But usually, my priority here is just getting Tymna off the table. If I could, for example, get a turn 3 Prossh, if I had a mana dork or something, I would absolutely just play Prossh. But in any turn where I can't play Prossh, my priority is just making sure my opponent's not going to be drawing lots of counters. And that they will be strained a little bit more on resources in the later game. So we have a couple of options this turn. Because of the Dark Ritual, there's a ton of different stuff we could do. We could, for example, Dark Ritual into Wanvali Acid Moss, which is something I didn't think about much at the time, but it would give us access to 5 mana on the next turn and take out one of their lands. But again, they have 7 cards in hand. They're drawing another card next turn. I don't think we're going to manage to make them miss land drops, and they don't need a ton of mana to operate. So my priority is still just getting Prossh out quickly. We use Sylvan Library, we find Abrupt Decay, which is great. We get to keep both cards, and now we're just going to kill Tymna. So one thing I should note about this game is when we cast a Sylvan Library, our opponent paused for a long time before it resolved, and that might have just been a good bluff. In fact, looking on the game as a whole, it probably was a good bluff. They might have been faking that they had a Daze or something like that, and so we wind up maybe putting a little too much stock in the idea that they have Daze or Force of Will this game. This turn they just play Stoneforge Mystic and go for Sword of Feast and Famine, while holding up 2 blue mana, so probably a counter. We're going to try not to do anything on our turn, because if we let them untap with 4 lands, they're just going to Stoneforge out the Sword of Feast and Famine, hit us with it, and then they're going to have as much mana as they want for the rest of the game, basically. We get Tainted Pact, which is pretty good. If we just had a straight-up removal spell here, that would be better, because Tainted Pact is going to add 2 to the cost of whatever we find, but Tainted Pact is still pretty nice. It means that we are unlikely to get sorted next turn. We're going to be able to find something to play around that. So we go ahead and just fetch something out, throw some lands to the bottom with Sylvan Library, and our opponent is actually going to cast a Tainted Pact at the end of our turn. And we have to think about this for a while, but we're just going to go ahead and Tainted Pact on their upkeep still. We could Tainted Pact in response, but I kind of want to see what they're getting. If they do end up getting a Force of Will or something with this, then Tainted Pacting response won't matter. We've already used Abrupt Decay, so there's nothing we can do to get around a Force of Will next turn. So we're just going to have to hope that they don't go for Force of Will, and that we get to Tainted Pact for something that can stop them from sorting on their next turn. So, long story short, they grab... What did they grab here? Hard to say. They exile a lot of stuff, and it might have just been a removal spell. I'm not sure. It doesn't end up mattering too much to the game, because this turn, they go ahead and Thoughtseize. They might have actually taken the Thoughtseize. Yeah, they took the Thoughtseize. I guess they're trying to make sure we can't break up their combo. We're going to Tainted Pact in response, and mill through a lot of stuff at this point. Tainted Pact, of course, one of the hardest cards in Commander to use correctly, because you have to A, know what specific card you want, but B, if you're not finding it, at some point you usually have to stop before you run out of cards in your library. So right now we are looking for a Lightning Bolt, or a Dismember, or a Fire Covenant that we can cast off of Dark Ritual. Basically anything we can find that is removal and can sufficiently play around something like a Mana Tithe or a Daze. Now, Fire Covenant, of course, will not work for that, because we need to cast Dark Ritual to power it out, and if our opponent sees us cast Dark Ritual, they can just Daze the Dark Ritual, and then at that point we only have 1 mana, and if they've seen us grab Fire Covenant, they might very well do that. But the nice thing about Fire Covenant is because it kills 2 creatures, it's powerful enough to be worth a try. It's just a little bit higher upside. Again, this is me trying to balance different risks of stuff, but in the end I'm hoping we find Lightning Bolt or Dismember. Kolaghan's Command would have been another option to potentially kill a Stoneforge Mystic, but because they're about to Thoughtseize, we can't Dark Ritual into Kolaghan's Command after they put the sword into place. We're not going to get to kill the sword with it. So we throw away Kolaghan's Command, we throw away lots of lands, we throw away a Braid. Again, a Braid could get dazed, and it's not enough value to be worth keeping it. And there we get Fire Covenant. You also want to pay attention to Tainted Pact. With Tainted Pact, what you're throwing away, just in case you throw away Craterhoof Behemoth or something like that. You don't want to end up trying to tutor something that's not in your deck. So in this case, we Dark Ritual and Fire Covenant, and thankfully they didn't have anything. I was assuming they had a counter in hand, given they had 7 cards, but I guess even if they did have a counter, they would have had to tap pretty low to use it, and it could be that they're just trying to hold up something. They thought Seize Aware, Monvolate, Acid Moss, and then they just go ahead and Thrasios, which is interesting. So they've tapped out now. We can't play a Prossh this turn unless we get lucky and hit an Ancient Tomb or something like that, but we are not under too much threat, because the thing about Thrasios is that even equipped with a sword, it can't get through Catacomb Sifter because Catacomb Sifter has Devoid. It's colorless. And we get a little bit lucky, use the Sylvan to hit 2 different cards that are essentially 1-mana ramp spells, because Wall of Roots and Fellwar Stone both make mana when they come into play. And at this point, we've decided they probably don't have a Daze. And we're just going to go ahead and play Wall of Roots into Fellwar Stone to Catacomb Sifter. Might have been a little bit unnecessarily risky, but that's a decision we made. Then they go ahead, they untap, they Gitaxian Probe. Kill our Eldrazi Scion, and at this point I have an intimation of what's about to happen, which is that they are thinking we can't block their sworded up Thrasios anymore, and they're just going to try to attack and get blocked by Catacomb Sifter and be sad. And yep, here it comes. Sword of Feast and Famine, equip Thrasios, attack, get blocked by Catacomb Sifter, and then they message us being a bit disappointed about the fact that Catacomb Sifter could block their Thrasios. It's an understandable mistake to make. I've certainly done the same thing myself before in this format, and in Cube, I think, with other Devoid cards, maybe? Anyway, but this turn we just go ahead and play Prossh and Goblin Bombardment, and they scoop it up at that point because we can throw around as much damage as we want to. They can't get through with their sword, and as it turns out, they had a Armageddon and some removal in hand, nothing that was going to help very much against what we were doing. And they insist that if they had played differently, they would have been able to win by not making that mistake. I'm not sure, just because even if they do Armageddon, that means they don't have a sword in play, and it means we have a Fellwar Stone, a Wall of Roots, and a Sylvan Library, plus another land that we're going to play the next turn, but who knows? It certainly, they made a play that they would not have made had they realized what the Catacomb Sifter was there for, but I still think we were in very good shape this game, thanks to Goblin Bombardment, plus Ashnod's Altar, which, even if they had managed to kill Prossh, we could have played Ashnod's Altar and just immediately replayed Prossh, and then, unless they were able to find a sweeper, which Timnath Thrasios really doesn't play many, if any, sweepers, we would just be able to use Ashnod's Altar to get out Prossh every turn for the rest of the game if we wanted to. Okay, anyway, so we clean up that game, thanks to the power of the dragon, and we run out 2 more this league. So this is up against Markov here, and we keep an extremely risky hand, which is worth talking about a little bit maybe, because we got a little lucky to win this one. So we keep a 1-lander, and the reason I keep the 1-lander is because we get to go ahead and play out Llanowar Elves. Then the next turn we are going to use Llanowar Elves to use Wild Growth on Karplusan Forest, and whoops, it's playing out automatically, sorry about that. Anyway, so just to pause for a second there, we kept a hand with 1 land because it was going to let us make a lot of mana quickly if the Llanowar Elves didn't get killed. And Markov runs very little removal and a ton of 1-drop creatures, so I feel like it's pretty unlikely for them to kill the elf. If they had killed the elf, we would have been in a lot of trouble this game, but the hand was very good otherwise, and sometimes you just have to take some risks here. So what ends up happening is our plan goes fine. They play a 1-drop Vampire. We use Llanowar Elves to put Wild Growth in the Karplusan Forest, and then Farseek out a 2nd land. We haven't drawn a land yet, but we have drawn Chandra, which is amazing in terms of mana generation and also insurance against a crazy vampire coming out. So they go ahead and just develop the board normally. They have a Legion Lieutenant, which is probably the best 2-drop in their deck, but it doesn't matter that much because we have a Dismember. So they get to hit for a bunch of damage. Again, against Markov, your usual strategy is you can take some early hits. You want to play out a Prossh, which stops their attacks cold, unless they've had a really good start or they can kill Prossh. And then from there you try to win with value. You either find a sweeper off of some card draw, or you maybe take a hit, don't chump block with a bunch of tokens, and then kill them on the backswing. So you have some different options, and we run a couple of sweepers. So I wouldn't say that Markov's a great matchup, but it's pretty even. I don't worry when I see Markov the way I do if I see Kess or Jace or something like that. So we go ahead and play out Chandra this turn, use Chandra to play a Mind Stone. I love the ramp in this deck. Sometimes you can just do crazy things with it. And here's a choice where we either could have used Chandra to kill the Legion Lieutenant or use Chandra to play the Mind Stone. Either way, we can still get a Prossh down next turn if we use Land of Werewolf to play Boreal Druid. But I decided to go ahead and use the Dismember here. It means it's a little harder for our opponent to disrupt our mana and makes it more certain we get a Prossh down. Plus it lets Chandra survive, which means we just get extra mana for the rest of the game. That, I think, was the right decision, but it's possible that they might have played another Lord this turn and we would have wished we had the Dismember or something like that. Who knows? So we kill the Lieutenant, put out a Boreal Druid, so turn 3, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mana on the board. Again, an unusually good start, but it's the kind of thing, that's why we kept that opening hand. It had the potential to do something really explosive if we drew one more land. So our opponent goes ahead, untaps, fires off, a couple more vampires, a vampire and a Stoneforge Mystic, and the Stoneforge Mystic gets Umezawa's Jitte, which just makes no sense to me at all. Umezawa's Jitte is horrendously bad against Prossh because if you attack with a creature that we can block with a Kobold, we can just block with a Kobold and sacrifice so that the Jitte never gets any counters because the creature never deals combat damage. But whatever, we happen to draw on a Braid, so even if they had gotten a Skull Clamp, I guess we'd have an answer. We're working pretty well this game. So we're going to hold up the Braid and we're just going to go ahead and play out Prossh here. And things are looking pretty good from here. They have a bunch of tiny vampires that can't really attack through our tokens. We have a Chandra that's getting close to ultimate. But the way Markov games go for almost any deck is how many of their insane bombs have they drawn. So far, we've seen Legion Lieutenant, we've seen them fail to get Skull Clamp, another one of their crazy bombs. But they do turn out to have Fire Covenant, a card that I might advocate for banning it. I mean, I obviously played in this deck because it's amazing, but in a 30 life format, I think it's just maybe a little too strong because as you can see here, they've paid life that they don't care about their life total too much, and they're going to kill our entire board, which by all rights we should probably be dead now, but we're going to go ahead and fight it out. So we go ahead and abrade. We abrade the Gul'Draz's Vampire. We could have gotten the Pulse Tracker because the Pulse Tracker is attacking for 2, but the Gul'Draz's Vampire can get Intimidate, which might be relevant because it can't be chumped by Kobolds. So we go ahead and kill the Gul'Draz's Vampire. They can attack Chandra down to 1, which is what they do. Now notably, they at one point attacked us rather than attacking Chandra because they couldn't have killed Chandra. I think you just always have to get the mana Planeswalker off the board against this deck. They, could have had a Chandra dead by now and had us at a few points of higher life total, and we would be completely dead. There would be nothing we could do except to rip a sweeper here. But instead they let our Chandra survive, and who knows, maybe they just drew the Fire Covenant or something like that, and they were planning on playing a totally different kind of game, so can't really say. We do need to draw a land here to get ahead, but thankfully we do. One nice thing with this deck is that almost all our lands come into play untapped. We have one Copperline Gorge that I'm thinking of replacing at some point, but at the very least we have a lot of opportunity to make mana. So we go ahead and use Chandra for that beautiful mana ability, and we cast Prossh again, and now we get 8 Kobolds, which is even more chump blocking value. And we're holding on, so we hit a land, which was like a 1/3 chance of happening, maybe a bit higher. A little bit lucky to hit a land, or we could have hit a sweeper too, but we've been beating the odds a little bit. They play an Olivia Mobilized for War, not a huge threat. So at this point, my thinking is that we're mainly worried about another Lord coming down, something that would let them deal a lot more damage to us, or them just killing Prossh and being able to kind of attack through our Kobolds. Because even though the Kobolds are great blockers, they are fairly miserable at actually killing what they block. And this is one of those games that makes me wish maybe that I still had Obelisk of Urd in the deck. The Convoke 6-mana spell that gives all creatures of a chosen type +2/+2. One of the best cards in the Markov deck, and for us, we can cast it immediately after playing a Prossh to give all our Kobolds a buff. I eventually cut it because I felt like it was a little fragile. It was an easy target for something to get killed, and even having a bunch of 2/3s is not always enough in these matchups. You generally want to kill your opponent in one turn, but with Markov being so popular, and with Kobolds plus Obelisk being a great answer to Markov, it's possible I should bring it back into the deck. Anyhow, so at this point we are looking to draw a sweeper. A Fire Covenant or a Toxic Deluge would still be great. We don't really care about killing all our Kobolds if we can kill all their vampires and leave ourselves with a dragon. Something like an Ashnod's Altar would be amazing, an engine that lets us recast Prossh. Craterhoof Behemoth here would be an instant win. Green Sun Zenith for Craterhoof Behemoth, we couldn't quite afford that, but something like a Green Sun Zenith would be great because we could still get Primeval Titan off it. Westvale Abbey would be great because we could attack for 9 points of lifelink damage and for lethal next turn. And we get Skull Clamp, so A lot of draws in our deck that would not have been great there, of course, but quite a few that are game-winning. Skullclamp turns out to be one of those. It's not automatic, but we now get to draw like 8 cards this turn and still be pretty certain we're not going to die on the next turn. So we clamp. We're drawing lots of mana, which isn't too helpful. Not without a way to sacrifice Prossh and potentially recast it on the next turn. But we just clamp until we find something useful to do. So here we have a Green Sun Zenith, which can't fetch anything too great. We could get a Reclamation Sage if they had played an Obelisk Divert or something, but in this case we're just going to play out Coalition Relic, use him to Turok, which helps ensure they're not going to have as easy a time playing their commander in 2 turns. Take out a Fatal Push and an Umezawa's Jitte from their hand. So we knew about the Jitte, which leaves them with 1 unknown. And because we have the Green Sun Zenith, if we survive the next turn, we just get to Green Sun Zenith for Craterhoof Behemoth and win if we don't lose too many kobolds. So because we're at 14 life, we have a little bit of a buffer, and we're just going to wind up taking some damage here. So they play out Kalastria Highborn, and are they going to discard this card and free us from our worries? They do. Okay, they discard a Chrome Mox, which was not going to help them very much, and then they just attack with everything, and they're, you know, this is probably the right play. You're setting up to win on the next turn for sure, if I can't do something crazy, but... And at this point, they're dealing enough damage to us that neither of our sweepers would be that helpful, especially with the Kalastria Highborn giving them an extra 2 points of drain, but they are attacking for exactly 12. We could have just taken all of it, but just in case I somehow miscounted the number of vampire tokens or something, I just go ahead and block the Kalastria Highborn. They can't really win at this point anyway. So they drain us, we go to 2, but we untap and Green Sun Zenith for Craterhoof Behemoth, and attack for, what is it, something like 45 damage this turn. So yep, that's one of the ways that you win with the big dragon. Even if your opponent doesn't get frustrated and give up, you can just combo kill them as well. So that's game 4 against Markov, which leaves us 1 more game in the league. Against Zkopje, man, I never knew how to pronounce this name. They play all the time, they're good, very friendly. And they are on Marath today, so they start out with just a Savannah, no Mana Dork, which is good because our hand is pretty slow. We Thoughtseize, and we see... Sorry, what we saw there for a second was Stoneforge Mystic, Recruit of the Guard, Knight of the Reliquary, and Sylvan Library as cards we could have taken. The Stoneforge Mystic can be very dangerous because it can grab Basilisk Collar and Umezawa's Jitte and cards that let them kill a lot of our kobolds very easily. Marath plus Basilisk Collar is a combo that I've lost to before playing Prossh against Marath because you can just never get your dragon to stick. But Sylvan Library also draws them a lot of cards and we have no answer to it. While Fire Covenant at least lets us kill other creatures once, so they don't get to have any equipment stuff go on. So we're going to let them have the Stoneforge Mystic. They play it out and just fetch a Basilisk Collar, so they're going to try and set up Marath plus Basilisk Collar, sure. And we'll just knock out cards as we see them here. So we know 4 of the cards in their hand. We draw Xenagos, which is interesting, definitely not a bad card to have in a mid-range matchup, just pumping out 2/2s. And we go ahead and fetch a Deathrite Shaman. And we could have fetched a Birds of Paradise or something, but because we know they have a Wooded Foothills in hand, and because we have used a Windswept Heath, this Deathrite Shaman is going to make reasonable amounts of mana for us. And the great thing about it is it's a lot harder to kill than a normal Mana Dork with Marath. It takes, for example, if they had 4 mana, they could play Marath and kill a Birds of Paradise, but they can't play Marath and use Marath's ability to kill a Deathrite Shaman. And so we go ahead and fetch that. Again, maybe not the right choice, maybe it's more important to have guaranteed mana, but given that we can tap it for mana twice, that's good enough for me. So on their turn, they make a really interesting play, something I wasn't expected. They use the Wooded Foothills, and then it turns out one of the 2 cards they've drawn that we didn't know about was Eldritch Evolution. So they attack first. We don't block just in case they're doing some kind of weird pinging thing. And yeah, they Eldritch Evolution and go get Palace Jailer. Yuck. Alright, so our mana's gone. They are going to draw an extra card off of this. And that play would be absolutely devastating against most of our potential hands, just because we don't have a lot of early creatures. And in general, it's going to be a while before we play Prossh, and them having the Monarch for that long isn't going to let them get a lot of value, possibly set up Marath plus Basilisk Collar, or possibly just combo kill us with a Kiki Jiki or something. So things are not looking great, but thankfully we have Xenagos, and so we get to, when they make a perfectly sensible play and just throw out Knight of the Reliquary, I guess they're probably looking for more mana because they seem to have been missing land drops. This is a perfectly fine play. There's nothing else better I think they could have done with 3 mana. They attack him with Palace Jailer. We take it, again, just in case they're holding a land to keep up a Mana Tithe or something like that. Although if they were holding up Mana Tithe, we should have just Fire Covenanted then there, so maybe that was a punt. we maybe didn't play that perfectly, but as it turns out, there was no Mana Tithe in their hand. We go ahead and Fire Covenant, clear the board, and then play out Xenagos, make a hasty Satyr, and take back the Monarch, which I'm sure was a dismay for our opponent. So they got to draw 2 cards, we get to draw 1 here. They go ahead and slam Flame Tongue Kavu, taking out Deathrite Shaman. A little annoying, but because we have Xenagos and Xenagos can make mana, it's not going to keep us from playing Prossh the next turn. We are just fetching out at this point to thin our deck because we have been drawing a lot of lands, would rather at this point not be drawing lands. We play out Prossh, which is fairly good against Marath when they haven't set a Basilisk Collar yet. That's a lot of blockers, a dragon that is bigger than anything they have. Again, really good against these mid-range value decks. They do, on the other hand, draw Zealous Conscripts. So before, we were setting up to just use Xenagos into Craterhoof Behemoth and win the next turn. If they just play something like a Marath, they can't stop that. But what they do instead is play Zealous Conscripts, steal Prossh, and kill Xenagos, also attacking me. I, of course, make sure to block both of their attacking creatures so they don't get the Monarch back. We do get our Prossh back, thankfully. I didn't have a way to sacrifice it. But because they have Zealous Conscripts on the board and they have 3 red mana, we know that they could just play Kiki-Jiki possibly out of nowhere, or like Worldly Tutor into Kiki-Jiki, or any number of other things. So we're going to make sure to keep up Dismember this turn. It's not like we have much else to do. We just play Fyndhorn Elves, hit them with the big dragon. Our life total is not really in danger from this deck, so we might as well just get in the value damage in case they have a way to stop Craterhoof Behemoth, like a sweeper or something like that. So they play Gaddock Teague, which isn't going to matter very much. It only turns off a couple of our spells, and we've already cast one of them in this game, the Green Sun Zenith. Then they play Recruiter of the Guard to get Kiki-Jiki, threatening to set up the win for next turn, the right play, I think. And then they play out a Skull Clamp, so we know their hand, it's Basilisk Collar, Kiki-Jiki, although they don't have any free spells they can play anyway. We just kill the Zealous Conscripts when it attacks, untap, and fire off a Craterhoof Behemoth, and that's the 4-1 right there. So, a league in which we, I think, went first twice, second 3 times, so no luck, crazy luck on that front. We had to get a little lucky to beat Markov, in that we ripped a land and then ripped one of our better draws in the Skull Clamp the turn after that, but you know, we managed to, by doing that, undo a Fire Covenant they had cast. If they hadn't cast the Fire Covenant, they would have been in real trouble that game anyway. And overall, we played against a bunch of mid-range decks and beat almost all of them, and that's kind of what Prossh is meant to do. Would not recommend playing this if you expect to run into a lot of Jace or Teferi. The thing about Prossh is that you do need one of your combo cards to win usually. You don't just win with Prossh, you usually need to resolve a Beastmaster Ascension, or a Hit Run, or a Craterhoof, or a Fecundity, or something like that to get the engine going. And the blue decks are pretty good at, if the player is skilled, ignoring the Prossh and just countering your engine cards, which means that you are just kind of a sluggish deck that can't kill fast enough to stop them from comboing off with a Time Spiral or something like that. It's possible that the addition of him to Turok and Rakdos' return helps those matchups a little bit, but I still think this deck is better positioned against the mid-rangey things. But it's a lot of fun. There are definitely a lot of games where you just get to go off and draw half your deck with Fecundity. You didn't see us go off with Ashnod's Altar here, but that's also a lot of fun, sacrificing Kobolds to make 2 mana, and then sacrificing Prossh, and then recasting Prossh, and then sacrificing the Kobolds again. There have definitely been games with this deck where I have drawn 40 cards in a single turn, just in the course of a normal, very competitive 1v1 Commander game. And when you're not playing blue deck, that is an unusual pleasure. So I would definitely recommend giving Prossh a try. And let me just go back to the deck list to make sure you can kind of see all of it in case you want to build the deck. Although I'll also try to post a link to it somewhere. So, moving back here to Prossh, this is everything. I'll scroll down a bit so you can see all of the lands that we're running here. Temple of the False God and Westvale Abbey are 2 of the more unusual choices. Again, just trying to get lots of mana. And something I've realized over the course of playing is that I haven't been playing Cavern of Souls in this deck because we don't really care if Prossh gets countered most of the time. In fact, sometimes it's better if they counter Prossh so they have one less counterspell to stop other things, but resolving things like Mana Dorks and Craterhoof Behemoth and whatever else seems important enough, and the deck has enough other colored mana, that I think I'm going to cut Copperline Gorge for Cavern of Souls. It also doesn't hurt that Cavern of Souls always comes into play untapped. But it's possible I'll end up changing this at some point. Otherwise, I'm pretty happy with the deck as is. If you wanted to add anything, and we're experimenting with cutting certain cards, the cards that I might get rid of if I had to get rid of something here would be Moanvili Acid Moss, which I added recently. It's kind of a flex slot. Sometimes it's a little bit awkward to be playing a 4-mana spell that doesn't really affect the board very much. Rakdos' Return, again, I haven't really gotten much experience with this. It's totally possible that something else will be better. Hedron Archive is a pretty powerful ramp spell, but since I've added Dark Ritual, I've started to tilt more with Markov being more popular in the format. It's not really good enough to just be, playing this cool ramp spell to get a turn 4 Prossh. We have plenty of ways to get a turn 4 Prossh already. It's generally you want to be aiming for a really turtle ramped out turn 3 Prossh with cards like Dark Ritual and these Talismans and Mind Stones that tap for mana immediately. Or you want to be playing kind of a long grindy value game. Hedron Archive can be helpful for that, but anyway, it's a flex slot. It's pretty good. Drawing 2 cards can be nice sometimes, but one of the weaker cards in the deck. Also, Wood Elves, not amazing. It's like a ramp spell that can block. It gets the land into play immediately. Lands are a good form of ramp because they can't be swept away, but definitely the kind of card that I could see cutting to experiment with some other stuff. Anyway, that's the Prossh video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll be trying to put up a lot more content in the coming weeks, so I hope you'll come back and check those out, or follow the channel and you'll be alerted when I post anything new. Have a great day.